respect that there are differences of opinion and conscience on this issue. All we ask is that you hear us out as we share our convictions about Measure G and about the city that we love, which is Redlands. I am going to be starting us off, but I want first to introduce our panel. I've already introduced myself, but I will go down this way, right? Let's see, that's your left to right. First is Bill Cunningham. Then there is Andy Hoder, and on the end is Tom Ashley. And they are listed in the order in which we will speak on this slide. So I am going to be starting us off by taking a look at the Redlands City Attorney independent analysis, or it's called impartial analysis of Measure G. And his analysis, along with the full text of Measure G, is in your voter guide booklet you probably already got in the mail. It looks like this, and there's where it is. So I urge everyone to read it. Read both of them, both the measure and the city attorney's analysis. The city attorney's analysis has 8 bullet points that clearly state what approval of Measure G, I'm sorry, I not quite found the distance yet. They clearly state what approval of Measure G will do. So I'm going to go through those and let's get started. So you can see that's my topic, making sense of Measure G and looking at the impartial analysis by Redlands City Attorney. So there are 8 bullet points, and that's what I'm going to present. So the first point from the city attorney's analysis says, presently residential densities may exceed 18 dwelling units per acre, up to 27 dwelling units per acre maximum, upon a 4/5 vote of City Council and findings. Approval of Measure G eliminates the vote and findings requirement. So this means developers can build unlimited density apartments. Now, why does that matter? Why is that one of the first points? Actually, transit-oriented development, which is what we're talking about, is nothing new. It's probably from the late 80s, early 90s it started. And actually this image is one of the first transit villages on the BART in San Francisco. This is Pleasant Hill. And I wanted you to see it because you see the density. The first point on successful transit-oriented development is that density is necessary, and it's needed. Density is meant to provide the population that's needed to sustain the transit investment. Density is supposed to ensure ridership. So I just wanted to let you know that. So that's the first bullet point in the city attorney's independent analysis. The second bullet point in his analysis says, presently residential buildings exceeding 2 stories or 35 feet in height are prohibited except upon a 4/5 vote of the City Council and findings. Approval of Measure G eliminates the general plan height requirement. So this means developers can build unlimited height apartments. Now, we all love our Redlands mountains, and we love seeing them. But this will affect that view. I've got a picture here of the Summit Apartments. They're near Mountain Grove, and these are only 3 stories high. But you can already see that there's only a little piece of a mountain there. So if we have a lot of these, we'll only be seeing, I believe, scraps of our mountains. And, that's a part of the beauty of Redlands. This is another example, and this is called the Crossings. It's in the Donut Hole area on Lugonia and at the corner of Lugonia and Nevada Street.
The shopping center.
Yes.
There is no shopping center. This is apartments.
But it's by a shopping center.
It's by Citrus Plaza.
Well,
Down the street.
it's on Lugonia
Yeah.
at the corner of Nevada Street. Citrus Plaza is on the other side of Alabama Street. Yeah, this is a little bit past the DMV actually. These are new, they're not yet ready to be rented. And like I said, they're 4 stories high. And I think there are mountains behind it somewhere. Okay, the third point that the city attorney made in his analysis says this: presently, street intersections with traffic levels of service C must maintain that level of service. Approval of Measure G eliminates this requirement. So this means you will be sitting in traffic longer. And this picture is taken on Tennessee Street at some point last month. Let me just make one comment. I see your hand. We're going to hold questions until we've finished our speaking. I appreciate your agreement to that. That will help us move along. And so if you have a question, maybe write it down so you can remember it. Thank you. Okay, so I can say a little bit about these levels of service. I did look it up. And so right now we're currently at C, which is called stable flow or near free flow. The ability to maneuver through lanes is noticeably restricted, and lane changes require more driver awareness. That's where we are now. Let's just see what D says. D says, approaching unstable flow. Speeds decrease as traffic volume increases. Freedom to maneuver within the traffic stream is much more limited, and driver comfort levels decrease. We've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
And moving down to E and F, which are the 2 lowest. E is an unstable flow operating at capacity. Any incident will create serious delays. F is a forced or breakdown flow. Every vehicle moves in lockstep with the vehicle in front of it, with frequent slowing required. Travel time cannot be predicted, with generally more demand than capacity. Now, most design or planning efforts typically will use service flow rates at LOSC or D in order to ensure an acceptable operating service. So we are eliminating the C requirement, so it's going to go down. No one can say how much, but I just want you to know what those mean, those letters. Okay, the 4th bullet point in the city attorney's independent and impartial analysis says this: presently, no new general plan residential land use designations may be established by the City Council. Approval of Measure G permits the establishment of new general plan residential land use designations. So this means that something like this could be your neighborhood if you are in this transit village planning area. So you can see there's just, 1-story homes, and then all of a sudden this started rising up. And this was taken in Rancho Cucamonga. I don't know what their land use designations were, but it's just an example of what could happen. And I have another example just for a laugh. This is an extreme example.
Wow.
There was a lady named Edith Macefield. She's now passed away, and she lived in the Ballard area of Seattle. And what happened is they decided to build a big commercial area called Ballard Blocks. But she left her home, and she had been born in it and wanted to stay there. So you can see what they did. They built around her home, and she did live until she died, until her death in that home. But you don't really want to be Edith. I mean, we don't want to see this. we do love our homes, and I think sometimes, many people have said to Edith at the time, why aren't you just selling? You can make $1 million. But for her, she loved her home, and that's where she wanted to be. So sometimes it's not always cut and dried money issues or anything like that, but there's actually some emotional reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And Edith is quite an example. And in fact, she became kind of a cult hero in Seattle. And some of the tattoo parlors began to create tattoos of her house, with a little banner over it saying Edith. So anyway, I just thought I'd put that one in there.
I wonder
So we're not
if
too
up was a reference to
serious.
her.
Okay, this is the 5th point in the city attorney's impartial analysis. And it says, presently certain new development projects must prepare a socioeconomic cost-benefit study before approval. Approval of Measure G eliminates this requirement. And, without a study, this is what this means, without a study, the impact on schools and services is unknown. You can only guess. And this is the 6th bullet point from the city attorney and his analysis. And it says, presently certain residential subdivision projects are subject to competitive review for issuance of building permits. Approval of Measure G exempts subdivisions from this requirement. So I need an explanation of what competitive review was. And basically that's about what the builder wants to bring to the city, whether it's parks or a playground, different things like that go in the subdivision. So if this is exempt from any sort of competition, I think that means fewer amenities, and it means developers do what they want. This image is an extreme example, I think, of just building all the houses crammed up next to each other. I believe that approval of Measure G will cost you money. And again, the city attorney's independent analysis. This is the 7th point. Presently, new development must pay 100% of its development impact fees. Approval of Measure G permits the city to lessen this requirement. That's a fairly vague statement, but I do believe this means higher taxes for residents or a reduction in services. Someone's got to take up the slack. This is the city attorney's final bullet point in his analysis. And it says, voter-approved measures R, N, and U, which were voted on here in Redlands, prohibit more than 400 residential dwelling units constructed within city in any year. Recent state legislation has suspended enforcement of this limitation through the year 2025. Approval of Measure G permanently exempts residential dwelling units constructed within the Transit Village planning area from the 400 dwelling unit limitation. So this particular point shows to me that the City Council is more strict than the state, because 2025 is 5 years away, but permanent is forever. So this really means unlimited housing units in this 782-acre area, which does include the mall area. The mall is 12.2 acres. So the other 770 is the rest of it. And this goes from Alabama Avenue on the west to Judson Avenue on the east. And there's this little finger going up. That's Orange Street, all the way to Ligonia. And then the lower southern part is around Olive Street. It includes part of Olive Street. In conclusion, I want to just leave you with an example of home in the Transit Village. So you can see this apartment, and you can see it has a little balcony. This is in Montclair. It's called Arrow Station. It has a little balcony, and you can sit up there after dinner or before dinner and sip your wine and watch the trains go by. And you can see in the distance, there's one that's even closer to this wall. So I just want you to see that these all exist now. So when we vote, we're voting for something we don't even know anything about. There's no plans out there. So what this means to me is noise, because the Metrolink is quite loud. And we will have Metrolink twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. And I heard that the woman from the Transportation Authority speak, and according to her, they'll be blowing pretty loud horns. Okay, so that is it for me, and I'm going to turn this over to Andy Hoder. Give me just one moment, and I will adjust.
Okay, if I may make one announcement, when this is over, we have plenty of signs outside. If you haven't signed in, would you please? Thank you.
Sorry. This is kind of new to me doing this with this kind of setup, so.
Here I am.
Okay, so I'm introducing to you Andy Hoder. He's a citizen of Redlands.
It's working. Okay, there we go. Great. So, first of all, thank you all for coming today. My name is Andy Hoder, and I'm a citizen of Redlands. This is how I'd like to begin. Campaign funding. To date, out-of-town developers have injected more than $86,000 into the Yes on G campaign. If Measure G is supposed to be so good for Redlands, then why would it be necessary to spend such a huge sum of money on fancy advertising to convince us of that? By contrast, the No on G movement is funded by ordinary citizens like those you see before you today, with obviously a much smaller budget. No corporate sponsors, no political parties supporting us. And why would we do this? Because Measure G dismantles everything that's been approved by voters in the past to preserve the character of our city while at the same time allowing a coordinated, logical approach to development. Proposition R, which was passed in 1978 and subsequently modified by Measures N and U, were not no-growth initiatives. They were sensible growth instruments that enabled the small-town image that we love to boast about today and that continues to draw people to this community. That tried and true structure would be wiped out by Measure G. The proponents of Measure G say, without G, we can't grow and build much needed housing. And there's a scare tactic. The truth is, without G, you still get your train and apartments could still be built along the railroad tracks, but you wouldn't be able to pack them in as tight or stack them as high. They say R, N, and U are outdated. We must change with the times. Again, these previously approved measures are allowing changes with time, common sense changes. But curiously, the fourth paragraph in Measure G says that transit-oriented development is to be guided by the state legislature enacting the Transit Village Development Planning Act of 1994. That's 25 years ago. So tell me about outdated guidelines. Will regulations from Sacramento make these changes inevitable? Proponents of Measure G want you to believe that the long arm of Sacramento is eventually going to force Redlands to abandon R, N, and U, after which there will be no restrictions at all, and our city will lose control of its destiny. More scare tactics. Yes, legislation from the state capitol could conceivably nullify current restrictions and impose new guidelines. But how does Measure G prevent that?
Right.
If the state can override R, N, and U, then why couldn't they do the same thing with G? In any case, the state of California cannot force you to build apartments or houses or anything else. The state can express a desired rate of growth, but there's no penalty if the city doesn't meet that target. In other words, It's a ploy so politicians in Sacramento can say, see, we're doing something about the housing crisis. Never mind that those construction targets are totally unrealistic for many different reasons. Now here's one of my favorites, height averaging. How stupid do they think we are? The term is an insult to our intelligence, but it's the language being used to persuade us to believe that it's okay to have taller buildings within the villages. And it goes like this. If you have a 5-story building and you construct a 2-story building in front of it, and then you divide those numbers in half, well, that's almost a 3-story building. Yeah, but the 5-story building is still there, and I still can't see the mountains behind it. Impact on infrastructure. In the last few years, residents of Redlands have had to cope with major water restrictions, replacing lawns and gardens with cactus and gravel. Yet with the proposed villages, there could be as many as 6,000 new toilets, showers, sinks, and washing machines drawing water from that same system. Does that make any sense? And you can be sure the apartment complexes are going to be nicely landscaped because that's what the pretty pictures show us, and that's how they justify their high rents. And where does all that domestic water consumption end up? It goes to the wastewater treatment plant. And guess what? Right now, as we speak, the city is grappling with a huge dilemma. After years of neglect, our wastewater treatment plant is in a major crisis. The city is estimating that it could cost $45 million to make the necessary repairs, but that's not even a firm number because the engineering calculations aren't finished yet. Do you think it's prudent to send the effluent from 6,000 new dwellings to a failing treatment plant? And what shall that cost? The city is already contemplating another 3.5% increase in water rates and 11% increase in wastewater charges. So now let me briefly respond to the myths that appeared on a recent Yes on G mailer. It solves the homeless crisis. Absolutely false. Filling in vacant lots with hundreds of high-rent apartments does nothing to address the homeless issue. It simply pushes homeless persons into the surrounding neighborhoods. Even the pro-G Redlands Community News acknowledges that. How about increase attainable housing? Notice the word attainable, not affordable. Attainable by whom? Landlords will charge the maximum rent they can get. Redevelop the Redlands Mall. Now there's something that we can all agree on, but the City Council wants you to believe there is no hope for the mall without Measure G. However, in 2014, a developer by the name of Brixton Capital, with their main office in Solana Beach, which is near San Diego, if you get my drift, bought the long vacant mall without any Measure G and came to Redlands with a colorful presentation of what their plan would look like, something like Victoria Gardens in the middle of Redlands. And a lot of people were mesmerized by those fancy drawings, but there was just one small catch. If you didn't already know it, the parking lot around the mall was owned by the city. And the developer said they couldn't make their plan work unless the city sold them the parking lot. So the city rolled over and sold them the parking lot. Some would say for a fraction of its value. But 6 years later, not a single shovel has been turned. And now their story is, we can't do anything with the mall unless we get our way with height and density. Should we trust the developer? Should we roll over again? Do you think Measure G is the only way to fix the mall? Here's a better idea. Redlands has a venerable university that turns out a steady stream of brilliant graduates every year. Redlands also has many citizens with deep pockets, and you know who they are, who are quite capable of creating major development plans on their own. As an example, those people that I'm talking about are taking a homely old newspaper building and turning it into a prestigious museum of Redlands. Why not put those two elements together, money and brains, and do something with the mall without resorting to out-of-town developers? Let me issue a friendly challenge to Jack Dangerman. Buy the damn mall, remodel it into something resembling the original La Posada Hotel with some small shops and boutiques around the ground floor and accommodation for visitors above. How about that? You're already restoring the old Santa Fe Depot, and that's great. Keep going. Build a hotel downtown. Support small business. That's more buzzwords. Measure G is about big business. These developers are not mom and pop carpenters. If anything, Measure G will add competition to existing businesses. How about build a bike and pedestrian infrastructure? Yeah, only for those living in the trendy enclave. It does nothing for existing sidewalks. Here's another one, enhance walkability. Walkability, I'm sorry to say, is mostly a myth. What about the folks who already live in Redlands, on the north side, or out towards the airport, out east towards Mentone and Crafton, out towards Yucaipa, up in Smiley Heights, or over towards San Timoteo Canyon and the Redlands Community Hospital? Where is their walkability? Do you think they're all going to get on their bicycles and ride down to the transit village for a latte? The city can't fix the sidewalks we already have, but they want to build new ones for the special people in the little villages. And do you really think people in the transit villages are going to sell their cars and go everywhere on foot or two wheels? You can't take the train to Big Bear if you like to ski. You can't take the train to your doctor's appointment in Highland. Nor can you take the train to visit your sick grandmother in Calamasa or take the train to go visit your friends in Moreno Valley. Oh, you say you are going to sell your automobile and call Uber if you have to travel outside the village. And what is Uber driving? A car. You're still in a car, making traffic, just not your car.
And you're
Cars
paying a lot of
around,
money
you know
for
the
it.
difference? With the transit villages, there will be more cars, more traffic, and more congestion in downtown Redlands. And there will be an even greater challenge to find parking for all those cars. The apartments will charge you a separate fee if you want a reserved parking space. And there'll be a waiting list if you and your spouse both have cars. So I hope you like parking meters, because that's where this will go. And if you don't believe me, have a look at Santa Monica, a place that has a commuter train and many amenities and many apartments and never enough parking. So I could go on, but I see my time is up. So thank you for listening and for caring about your community enough to come out and sit with us today. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Tom Ashley, and just give me a moment to get his presentation up.
So I'm Tom Ashley, and my hobby is Redlands history, so don't hold that against me. And I have to be on my side like this because I taught high school for a number of years, and I can't have people behind me because I don't know what you might be doing. And so I'm not at all, frustrated by talking to adults because you're nothing compared to teenagers. So about 4 weeks ago, I read the transit plan. I read Measure G, and then I got a letter in the mail that probably all of you did, and I read it, and I thought, well, I really respect the person who wrote it. He was on the Redlands School Board, and but it said that Measure G would end the homeless problem and a number of other things. And I thought, I've taught students for a number of years in advanced placement to read analytically and carefully and see if the information seems to be correct. For teaching advanced placement government and economics, and I taught students for so long to read all the information that comes in mailers. You are going to be hit with mailers, yes on G, like you wouldn't believe, because that $86,000, folks, is going to come to you in the last 3 days before March 3rd election. I saw this when Majestic Realty wanted to build in the donut hole, and they wanted to get that guy out of the city council, and they spent in 3 days $100,000. It broke all records for Redlands City Council in terms of outside influence jumping in. So, just thinking logically, that's not that difficult. We're told that Measure G will not have any traffic problems. Well, I talked to my wife. I said, well, let's just go around and look at what traffic is on just an ordinary day. Go ahead. So, I also wanted to examine how has Redlands done in the past in terms of apartments and parking. So the Kimberly luxury apartments on Redlands Boulevard and East Cypress, right on the corner, This is parking on Redlands Boulevard. Now, those folks are supposed to be parked in the, parking area that's adjacent or right behind the luxury apartments. But people tend to park where it's convenient. So, in terms of convenience, they're on Redlands Boulevard. It's nice that you taxpayers are paying for their parking spaces all along Redlands Boulevard. I don't know how the street sweeper goes along there and cleans that area, because that is just about 2 p.m. on this past week. 2 p.m. And if you go around, I don't care if it's just Kimberly Apartments, go to any apartment complex in Redlands, and you will see that there's street parking from one end to the other. Okay? So this doesn't bode well for the apartments that are going to be multi-story down in the transit villages. Next. So this is a cute little street called Laverne Street in Redlands, right off of Cypress Avenue. And for the block from Cypress down to Clark Street, it's solid cars on both sides, because this is apartments. So once again, supposedly the formula that was they come up with was 1.6 cars per house. Well, guess what? Mom and Dad each have a car, and Junior, who is 16, drives, and that's 3 cars. And of course, if you have everybody over for Super Bowl, add 10 more cars. Right. And then you have no parking lot to it. So imagine a 5-story apartment building down on Stewart. 5-story, and it's Super Bowl Sunday. And there's only one apartment on each story that has a Super Bowl party. Add 50 more cars, 10 cars per story, and of course they're going to be in a parking complex, they're going to be in a concrete building, and they're going to park where it's convenient. Well, that convenience might be in front of anywhere along Orange Street, anywhere along Stewart, on Oriental, anywhere that they can find a parking space, because it's going to be really tough. Go out to eat now and try to find a place on Friday night at Romano's or Citron or any other place on Orange Street. This is today without multi-story, high-density apartments in those areas. Next. So I wanted to see transit area. So San Bernardino has a beautiful 1919 Spanish Revival Santa Fe Depot, and you'll find parking on the east side of it that's right on the surface, and it stretches down a quarter of a mile. And guess what? It wasn't enough. Next. So they built this, and this is a parking structure. We're going to have this at each one of the 3 depot areas, because you got to stack them, folks. You have that many cars. Because, unless you're a proponent of and you believe in magic carpets and people on skateboards and riding their bicycles, you're going to have this. Now, this is actually 4 stories. There's a basement, then 2 stories above, and then you can park on the roof as well. Aesthetically, I'm not really excited about this. And they had a chance to do some matching architecture with the Santa Fe Depot, but San Bernardino is not too, And once again, there's no amenity requirement for developers that are going to be under Measure G. So they don't have to match the architecture of our Santa Fe Depot, which is in the historic district of Redlands. In fact, a nice little brown sign on Interstate 10 that designates the historic district, Orange Street of Redlands. Next. Here's a side view of the entrance. Next. And then the parking lot in front of the parking structure. As I said, this goes on a quarter of a mile. And there are no apartments around this structure. This is just to use the train, okay? So we are going to have a transit village, and I dare to say I really have a real problem using the word village when you have 2,000 or so friends around that are elbow to elbow. That village, okay? It's not on the Shire, and there's no, Baggins running around or wizards or anything else. The only village I wrote about is, Mountain Home Village. This is not a village. That's a very good terminology if you're trying to sell somebody a product of a nice living space. But this is not a village. Where do the kids play? I guess they could go out on the parking structure or run between the cars on the streets.
The roof.
Because the streets will not be streets any longer. They'll be canyons. 4 or 5 story buildings on both sides as you go down the canyon on Stewart Avenue. Next. So I began thinking, okay, where, in Redlands, if you're getting off the freeway, you got Alabama Street, Tennessee Street, that friendly street called Eureka, and then your University of Redlands. That's the on-off ramps. Now, you could say, well, the reason we're building the train is so that people won't use Interstate 10 as much, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, now, in your make-believe land, if you believe that, they go to Los Angeles because they have Amtrak. And, of course, the 5 and the 10. If you want to travel to LAX, no problem, right? Because everybody's on the trains. It's not true, okay? So the train can bring, a couple hundred people, but it needs to bring 10,000, and it's not going to do that, okay?
Not when they only run
if you
one
look at
twice
New
a
York
day.
Street, people are going to get off at Alabama, and they're going to get off at Tennessee, all right? And if you're going to use downtown, you're going to get off at Eureka Street. That's a fun thing to do because the 210 comes in with its on-ramp onto the 10 as you're trying to get off at Eureka Street. There are 2 lanes on Eureka Street, and on any given day and any afternoon of any given day, next. This is Tennessee Street. You've already seen one good picture that Lane had at her program. Can we go back to Tennessee one more time? You have on Tennessee both an on-ramp and an off-ramp. So in the morning, you're going to work. All right, this is what it looked like at 3:39 p.m. this past week. Okay, so you're going to, and I didn't turn around and take the picture looking across Redlands Boulevard, because on Redlands Boulevard, it goes down another quarter mile of cars. So you wait when you get to Redlands Boulevard to cross, and then you wait to cross Lagonia, then you wait to get on the on-ramp to get on to the 10 Freeway West, because I doubt if you're going to Banning or Ukiah for your job, okay? So needless to say, we are really, and let's just, let's go ahead and go to the next picture. Let's just estimate that, say, 6,000 people or 2,000 people live at each of the depot drop-offs, at 2,000. So 2,000 more cars coming off at Eureka Street or at Tennessee or any of those other streets. This is on the right here is University Street, and at 4:30 p.m. yesterday, 2 days ago, this is what it looked like. And when the light is red on Citrus Avenue, they can't turn right to get off the off-ramp. And they're going to the university or they're going up Citrus Avenue to the homes that are there. And of course, one of the things that is mentioned as a proponent of G is we'll solve this problem because people will be on trains and there won't be as much traffic at these off-ramps.
Yeah, right.
And once again, get your magic carpet ride out because you're going to need it. Next. Orange Street is just a couple days ago, and of course construction's going on. But the one thing about Orange Street is you look at it, you have 1- and 2-story buildings from one to the other. All these buildings are going to look like miniaturized hatches compared to what you're going to see on Stewart. Everything on this street will look exceedingly small. Next. So once again, looking the other direction, Orange Street, when you're going on the freeway and you're heading west and you're on the north side, you got the loop around and go. If you're coming from, let's say you're coming from a Stewart Avenue multiplex apartment, you're coming up to Stewart Street, you turn left. All right, so you're going to have a stoplight there at Orange Street, which is already there. Then you're going to turn left, and you're going to have another light at Pearl, another light that leads into the Bond shopping area, and then you get on the freeway. But you could be backed up, because you got 2,000 friendly village people that are living here, waiting to make the turn on Stewart. Your other direction is to go turn around and go back, and head to Tennessee. Oh, that's a wonderful change. That will get you locked up once again. Next. So, even with R, N, and U, guess what? We have development going on. We have the we have the entire area that is part of the House District number 1. Sprouts is there, they're doing really well. And guess what? They were able to deal with the limitations of 35 feet in terms of size. They have ample parking, but there is a problem they had to deal with in building there. Our downtown is in a flood zone. Okay, it's been in a flood zone from day one. Okay, because when Judson Brown laid out, actually when the town was laid out, Water Street, which is Redlands Boulevard, was the Mill Creek Zaha, was the drainage for the East San Bernardino Valley all the way out to Crafton and Mentone. So water that's falling in the Redlands East Valley parking lot for the high school comes all the way down through Redlands. Okay, so to mitigate that, in the 1930s, the Mission Stormwater Ditch was built, which is huge, just on the other side of the Redlands Mall. Okay, and that goes all the way down past Loveland and finally down into the Santa Ana River. But the point I'm trying to make here in this slide is that with R, N, and U that we've had for 40 years, we have had development going on. And it's been substantial and it's been consistent with the character of Redlands. The architect chosen by Jack Danjman for this project was to make the packing house district look like packing houses. And they do. Next. So, once again, packing house district number 1. Next. So driving around, packing house district number 2 is now under construction. 3 new buildings that are going up on Oriental Street that all follow measure R, N, and U. So we're not talking about measures that are depressing Redlands' growth and diversity. Next. So here's lots on Stewart. No limits on height, no units, no limit on number of units, and no environmental considerations can go on this. Think of that parking structure I showed you in San Bernardino. Aesthetically matching. You see the Santa Fe Depot, and you see the Stewart Street parking, or the packing house there on the left. That was the model for all the packing house district in terms of the construction of the buildings that are there. Next. So, on a typical day, you have to understand that Redlands downtown has had a parking problem from day one. So the town is laid out in 1887. There aren't too many cars in 1887, ladies and gentlemen. And we have added cars ever since, and ever since we've had a parking problem. Because State Street, they tried angle parking, we've had parking meters, we've tried everything. Now it's one way. And thank God, I'll get cursed for saying this, that the Redlands Mall went defunct because it added extra parking for State Street. Okay? Because now in front of CVS on any given day, CVS has got the parking lot full. On market night, you can see the front of the CVS is still packed, and halfway down on West Citrus Avenue is parking, and halfway down Redlands Boulevard is parking around the mall, which we don't own anymore. Okay? But once again, when the bowl is active, Redlands Bowl is active in the summertime, you'll find people parked there. You'll find cars parked there that are Beaver Medical Clinic employees during the weekdays, because we're hard up for parking here at Redlands. So, adding additional multi-story buildings, even with parking structures, people are going to park where it's convenient, not necessarily where you expect them to park. And you're going to flood the downtown with additional problems in terms of parking. Next. So once again, another view of CVS parking, which is the mall area. Next. So, Council Measure G allows for council to avoid restrictive measures passed by a majority of citizens 40 years ago. Most of all those measures passed with over 60% approval. That's in California. 60% approval. Petaluma did the same, because city councils, well, we love the people that we vote for. Well, guess what? We are supposed to trust them. And they're saying to you now, trust us on G. Even though we're not giving any specific limitations on what we can do, we will do what's best for you. And you know that we are going to have you in our interests. And of course, I love Tony Momberger. And I think our mayor is doing a fine job. Except I don't want to get it to go back to where we were in 1978 when the council approved everything on the face of the earth. And of course, one council approved the Redlands Federal Building 6 stories high. Thank God that the fire department went down and said, look, we only have a truck and ladder that can go 6 stories. You can't go higher than 6 stories. And you know, for almost half of its life, it was empty on the top 2 stories because there wasn't enough business to go in there. And now it's, of course, owned by Esri, and of course they filled in a little bit more. But once again, you build a huge building, and let's say it's not necessarily used. You got a big empty building, hence the Redlands Mall. Okay, next. Jerry, let's go back one more time, Lamb. Sorry, I get excited. Tax breaks for apartments that don't apply to single residential zones. You realize that Howard Jarvis, when he passed Proposition 13, was a big apartment owner. And one of the things he got in that particular bill was that apartments don't pay the same tax. And he argued that if I have a tax the same property level as a single residential home would be in terms of value, I'll just pass that on to my renters. And we want to be kind to renters because we want to keep the rent low. So he was able to get in that apartments pay less tax. It's still there. So we approve apartments for the downtown area. Guess who picks up the slack on that money that's not rolling in terms of property taxes to the state? Increase student numbers for school district. Before 78, we were told by the apartment people who wanted to build down on Barton Road and on Alabama Street that children don't live in apartments. Children don't live in apartments. That, you know, just these young people that are going to work at ESRI or others that once again are riding their bicycles and skateboards are going to be there. And so they go by ESRI and look at West State Street on any given day, and you will see the cars are lined up outside. And of course, they could easily go inside and park underneath those beautiful sycamore trees and the campus that Jack has designed there. But they're parked all along there. And of course, he keeps adding and buying more parking space. Just bought a big lot that's on Tennessee Street, and he also bought Lazy Boy, and the lot across it for what? Parking. And these are the people that are going to live in the downtown, riding their bicycles to ESRI, or living on New York Street and riding their bicycles. I drove into ESRI, my brother works there, and I said, I want to see the bicycles. And he showed me 2 places. 15 bicycles. There are 1,500 people working at ESRI. I'm sorry, I did not see the number of bicycles that I'm supposed to see. But magically, in your fantasy world, if you're in favor of G, people are not going to be using their cars as much. They'll have less cars. Well, they may not have gasoline cars, but they'll have electric cars. They're still going to have to get around. So, I don't want to give the green light to developers in Newport, San Diego, and Los Angeles. Thank you very much. One of the reasons that people live in Redlands is the character of the town. I have people twice a year take classes on Redlands history, and they're fascinated by what the town looks like with the old Victorian houses, with what Olive Street and other streets look like. It's because we've had previous city council people and the original developer, Frank Brown and Edward Judson, said we want 80-foot wide streets with 19 feet from the curb in so that we can have ornamental trees, a 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk, and then more ornamental shrubs like hedges, and then houses with 35-foot setbacks set in and everything else. So there was, a plan to begin with to make sure that Redlands looked unique. And I hate to tell you, I don't want to surrender that because of fear that the state might take this away. The state has had all kinds of proposals and laws to say, okay, each city needs to put in their quota because, after all, the state of California has a housing crisis. And the housing crisis, I don't think Redlands will solve it independently. As in, how many cities have met their quotas? None. None. Not a single city has met their quota. Now, what are they going to do? Take us all up to Sacramento and lock us up? And once again, even if, like, Senate Bill 50 just was defeated for the third time, okay? If Senate Bill ever passes, or comes close to passing, I hope that you write your state senator and state assemblyman and tell them you do not want the state of California taking away the city of Redlands' right to look the way we want to look and have a character of the town the way we should have it. We don't have to be imposed. If that's the case, we should have a revolution, vote out the good old Democratic president, or not president, but mayor, and then the members who represent us. And hopefully that's all of us. So one of the things when I studied the map when it came out, I said, what's with that Orange Street gerrymander?
Yeah.
What's with that? That's not near the downtown area, and it goes all the way to Lagonia Avenue. So you remember the slide that Wayne showed you, the house surrounded next with apartments? Here you go. We could do it on Orange Street. All of Highway 38 leads to the San Bernardino Mountains to Barton Flats using Highway 38. And that's even mentioned at the Eureka Street off-ramp that this is the junction for Highway 38. Next. Another house on Orange Street. Of course, our council in the history of Redlands has never treated Lagonia, which sometimes we call the north side of Redlands. It's historically Lagonia, folks. Right. And so we've never treated Lagonia the same. All you have to do is look at the curbs, the gutters, the sidewalks, and the fact that we don't have any kind of strict, we have chain link fence where we would not allow that on the south side of Redlands. We have all kinds of enforcement problems that we don't follow through in Lagonia. And I don't know where Eddie Tejeda was when this was brought up and this map was made, because he represents the Lagonia side of town. Of course, he is running for county supervisor. Well, I don't know, Eddie. Next. So, this is some of what we lost when the Redlands Mall went in. And of course, now we're being asked to make up for that mistake of the Redlands Mall by having another tragedy in 2020. Yes? And of course, it's not a shame that we lost livery stables on Orange Street because, we're in automobiles there. You can see the Santa Fe station there on the right, and the building that says EM Coke Commercial Company is still there on Stewart Street. Next. And we've had a real renaissance in the downtown. Look at Carlson's Hardware on the left, and then Carlson's brought back to the original what it looked like in 1888 when it was built, now into Romano's. But the problem that Romano's has is the problem that we've always had in Redlands. Find a place to park. Okay, so the parking that's next to it is the lot that's next to it is Citron, and then there's an empty area that's a parking area. That is the Southern Pacific right-of-way, which they gave up years ago. That's the only reason we have that parking area today, the Southern Pacific right-of-way. Next. So, of course, Joe Greensley's the Finney Block, original site for our Chamber of Commerce, and now, of course, it's a nice place to eat. And of course, the expectation is that small businesses like Joe Greensley's will do better when there's more people living downtown. No doubt. After you pay your $2,000 a month rental, you're going to jump on your bicycle and ride over to Joe Greensley's and have a nice meal. Probably 5 or 6 times a week. If not, you're going to go to Citron. And I don't know if you can afford that. I can't afford that. But of course, there's also going to be the food court, and that's nearby. And if you're smart, you just leave your car parked down at the food court, and then you don't have to hassle with the multi-story parking structure and stuff. It will take care of homeless. They can come in, if they can sneak over the walls and get around, at least have a roof over their head. Maybe that's the plan in terms of homelessness.
The parking structure.
Next. So, it's called the Santa Fe Historic District, and we've forgotten that that's why it's called that. But it can have 5-story, 4-story buildings all along this. And in case we take away and we lose a great deal in the process. Now, I've heard from some developers, they said, we won't build anything over 53 feet. Because 53 feet is the height of Krikorian, of the theater that's downtown. If you look at that, that's pretty tall, 53 feet. Okay. So, next. So, fix the Redlands Mall. That's, of course, not mentioned anywhere on G. Read the whole measure G. There's nothing saying fix the mall. If you read the interview by Bill Cunningham that was in the Community News yesterday, I think he pretty well has summed up why this is going to continue to be a problem, because you buy the Redlands Mall, it's going to cost you millions to tear it down, because you got to take every one of those bricks of Fort Cummings and you got to grind them all up and haul them all away, and then you've got to buy the CVS lease out, and they're doing really well because they have plenty of parking out front. And then you've also got to get rid of the mattress place and buy them out. And then there's Denny's, and they're going to buy them out, because otherwise you've got a really strange parcel of land. It's really strange because it used to be West State Street. So it doesn't fit into normal kind of transit village idea. Of course, for those people who live there to use the transit village, they're going to walk across Redlands Boulevard. They can't go through the gated area. They have to go up to Orange Street, cross, and then go over, maybe down by the steak place and get through. But anyway, read his interview because he really tells you the problem of the downtown Redlands Mall while people aren't leaping to try and get it torn down and get anything accomplished. And that's it for me, I think. Oh, I thought I'd show you West State Street at Eureka 1891, the thunderstorm. This came out a little bit blurry, but right where these people are standing is the entrance to the downtown underground parking lot of the Redlands Mall. Okay, next. And this, 1965 thunder shower. This is the corner of State and Orange Street. The La Posada Hotel is in the background there. This is just a thunderstorm. Okay? We don't have to worry about major winter storms. It's the thunder showers that'll develop over Redlands, because you basically live in a desert, and we get thunder showers here that are real busters. And so when they were preparing, for instance, the packing house district, sand goes down 6.5 feet. Where does that sand come from? Mill Creek. Mill Creek, when it overflows. And the Mill Creek Zaha is part of that overflow. Have you ever looked out to see what happened when they were building Redlands East Valley High School? They were coming up with boulders that were 400 or 500 pounds each. That came down in the wash from various storms. So all of downtown Redlands faces it. So if City Council wants a project, we need to have a bond issue to take care of the flood problems that we'll encounter in the downtown. Because if that's to wipe out the downtown, man, we're really going to have a tax revenue problem. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd encourage all of you to take Tom's history class next time it rolls around. It's pretty fascinating to learn. Now I want to introduce Bill Cunningham. He's a former mayor of Redlands. So Bill, take it away.
Well, I have, is this on?
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to say, except several comments. A push for G has to do with state legislation that is waved in our faces that we must build 2 4-story apartment buildings, one at the corner of Eureka and Redlands Boulevard and the other at Old City Hall. If we don't, then we'll really be in trouble. And of course, that's just nonsense. As was mentioned, the state legislation is dead. That doesn't mean that it won't come back, but it will take probably several times of effort. It's a very, very divisive issue that was proposed that we were threatened with. The boards of supervisors in California uniformly opposed it. The League of California Cities opposed it. In fact, the author of the measure, Scott Wiener from San Francisco itself also opposed it. Mr. Wiener is a rather interesting individual. he defined single-family homes as immoral. And he also has proposed that four-unit apartment be allowed in any single-family zone neighborhood. With regard to G itself, I suppose it might be useful to reflect on a little history. The three measures we refer to are N and U. The first one was passed in 1978, the same year as Prop 13. And its genesis was in the fact that on the year before, the council had approved 2,800 new homes, which would have been roughly 25% growth of the city almost instantly. The people called Friends of Redlands held their meetings in Armacross Library, the university people were involved. I was on the school board and I really didn't participate, although I did attend several of the meetings. But I felt at that time it was inappropriate for the school board to be involved with city affairs. In 1984, the city council then approved the apartments that you see on Barton. There's 1,038 in those two apartments across one another. And the claim was it's no violation of Prop R. We don't need to worry because there are not going to be any children. It's all going to be singles and couples from Northern Air Force Base. That following fall, we had 140 children waiting at the door to McKinley School. So the idea that everybody's going to ride a bike and walk from these places is simply naive. There's no school nearby except for Redlands High, which means parents of younger children are going to be transporting their children to school by car. Absolutely no other way to do it. We passed Measure N in 1987 in order to expand the dimensions and protections of R. It was immediately attacked by the council, and that's one thing to remember, and that is anytime you try to direct democracy, you're going to get attacked by those who are in power. And so the city council sued to overturn it. The court agreed that it should not be a part of the general plan, but the court did agree it should be a planning measure and awarded us our court costs and fees. So the city council had something of a pirate victory, actually. In 97, we passed Measure U, which was the most ambitious of the three. The combination of N and U have produced in the order of 100 acres of new citrus to the city, as well as 3 new parks without a single cent being imposed on the taxpayer. It also has protected both the canyons and downtown from inappropriate development, encouraged commercial development. My time in office as mayor actually was the most active time in commercial development in the city's history, in spite of the argument that growth control measures dampen the economic growth of the city. We're now in a situation where the city council, once again, is attacking the citizens' measure. And they argue, of course, that those of us who oppose really don't know what we're talking about. But there is no requirement for us to build any multi-story building being handed down by the state. There's absolutely no evidence that anything is going to solve the homeless problem. The homeless problem in the state of California grew by more than 20,000 individuals in just 2019. If you think about it, if you're freezing in a doorway in Chicago in December, guess where you're gonna head as soon as you can get there. And so we're going to basically have a burden of homelessness far more on our shoulders than any other portion of the country. The other issue, of course, is, and one of them that's dear to my heart, is there's absolutely no mention in G with regard to what to do with school children or provide schools. It's not even discussed. It's interesting that Mr. Weiner, who identifies him as past president of the school board, mentions nothing about schools in his letter. The emotional issues with regard to homelessness, and especially with regard to the mall, are just nonsense issues on our local basis. The mall has sat there basically empty for several decades. It's going to take multi-millions of dollars in order to develop it. And the only way they argue that they can develop it is by putting either a 4 or 5-story massive building on that real estate. I don't know about you, but ordinarily when you go into a city, its center is something civic or something cultural. So I suppose our cultural mark will be a massive apartment building at the United States. I'm not sure that all of us would agree that that's an asset. But in 1998, by the way, the League of California Cities recognized Redlands as one of the 4 most livable places in Southern California. And the agency that actually did that is SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments. And that includes all the cities and counties in the 6-county region excepting San Diego. And the competition, you might think, would be Claremont, Irvine, the beach cities, but Redlands was chosen. And they made an 8-page brochure touting our merits. And one of the things that was recognized was the asset that we had as a town with a historic village-like central area. And that is one of the most important features I thought should be recognized. We are basically that same town today. And we're now under the gun to have it changed. There's another concept with regard to growth I might mention that is in government, and that is the so-called jobs housing balance. And it's touted in the literature that you're getting that this is going to produce good paying jobs. Well, you're bringing 8,000 new people into town. Where are the jobs? Jack Dangerman has indicated that he would like to have housing for 300 new people for the new building that he's building. But 8,000, it makes absolutely no sense. With regard to the issues of parking, traffic, that's all been addressed. I do think downtown will become walkable because with the minimum amount of parking we have and traffic we have, things are going to be gridlocked, so the only way you're going to get around is by foot. But we have a chance to tell the city council that we don't want this. It's not appropriate to our town, it's not appropriate to our district, it's certainly not appropriate to our heritage and our responsibility to those that follow it. And it might be enlightening to recall that every dollar that's being spent in this campaign by the Yes on G is being spent by out-of-town developers in San Diego and Orange County, hired by a consulting firm out of Connecticut. And that's what we need. Thank you.
Okay. Are you free? Yes. All right, very good. So this actually concludes this part of our program. We went a little bit longer. We started a little bit late. For that, I apologize for the warmth of the room. But we will take some questions. I was originally planning we'd take them for about 30 minutes. Perhaps we don't need that much time. We'll see. But we do want to do the questions in an orderly fashion. So if you have a question, please line up over here on this side. Larry will have the microphone, and you will have your turn. You will get a turn to ask your question.
You're gonna
But
ask me questions?
one thing I want to say, please don't make any speeches. Just ask your question in like 1 or 2 sentences so that we can get to everyone and also so we get out of here at a reasonable hour.
You're not gonna ask
So thank you very much for that. And while you're coming up, I just want to say there are ways you can help us. One is donate to our cause. There are some cards outside if you want to do that, or you can go to our website, saveredlands.com, and give online. No amount is too small, and all of them are valued, and we spend the money very carefully. So you've already heard about what we're up against financially. And you can also request a yard sign or take one if they still are there, or you can volunteer on the website at the table at the conclusion of this meeting. So I just hope that you're there for your questions, and let's give everybody a listen in a courteous manner, and I'm sure you will. I thank you very much.
Why would the Redlands City Council seek the power to build unlimited height, unlimited density apartments if they don't plan to use it? And does Measure G apply to the current and all future city councils?
You're gonna go up, Josh? You have to get in that line.
I'm going to answer from here. It just makes it a little better mind-wise. And part of this I cannot answer because I do not live in the heads of the city council. So I don't know why they want this much space and power. I can only imagine that it's because just like the mall was the trendy thing to do back in the day, transit-oriented development is currently the trendy thing to do. And it looks like something that will help our city. I'm sure they want to help our city, I don't doubt that. What else did you ask? I think what is going to happen in terms of asking for that, it's, in my opinion, there is pressure from developers, these out-of-town developers on the council. We need this. Just like the Brixton company said, we can't do anything with the mall unless we own that parking lot. Same deal with other developers. It's about the money, quite frankly. So if anyone else would like to chime on this, answering, I welcome it.
Gotta get.
You need to get in line.
No, I just wanted to answer that.
Okay.
Developers and
Could you go to the mic?
That's why we're having people come up. Come over here. We will give you the mic for that answer, for your answer.
And developers indoctrinate city councils so they will lift restrictions. So when they come in, it's a wham bam thank you ma'am. They won't even come in and do the work until all the zoning restrictions are gone. Also, transit-oriented development are primarily residential because they need it to increase membership.
That's a good point. If you recall, when I was going through the city attorney's analysis, that first point for transit-oriented development is density. Density, residential density, is totally necessary in order to finance the transit itself. So we have an interesting problem since we are going to get a train. So I think that's all I'm going to say on that, unless anyone else wants to answer.
This gentleman right here asked, does this Measure G apply to all future city councils?
Okay, does Measure G apply to all future city councils? Well, as I read it, it is eliminating a lot of things, and as I recall saying in my talk, it's permanent. Whereas the state, for example, is only doing what they're doing until 2025. In Measure G, it says this is permanent. So, I don't know, which one sounds better in a way?
Well, you've actually already answered part of my concerns. There's, 2 weeks plus to the election. I got my sign planted in the front yard. You mentioned donations outside. What can we do in the next 2 weeks that would basically help turn the tide against all the massive mailings and stuff that we've seen already? What can we do?
Okay, I'll take it in the beginning, but then I'd like Andy to also talk about that. Number one, I think what all of you can do is talk to your neighbors, talk to people that you see in the grocery store. We have flyers. Could you hold that up? These yellow flyers here, we have a lot of them. Take some. I tend to do that and carry them in my purse, and I'll just start talking to somebody. I've taped them to the windows of my car. I have had so many conversations in parking lots. So take them. That's what they're for. There's whatever's out there, take it, and then figure out how you can use it with your friends and neighbors. And like I said, even put it on your car. I think there are some bumper stickers out there, but I have gotten a lot of response from having the flyer taped to both windows of my car. It works great for conversation starters, even with total strangers. So Andy, do you want to address this a little?
Just a couple of things, and I think it's a good question, but some people may be of the mind that we're so close to the home stretch that it's too late to do anything. Well, if you believe that, this is what the developer is doing now and will continue to do for the next 2 weeks. You're going to see an increase in these types of mailers and flyers coming to your front door. So if they're doing it, I think they believe there's still a lot to be said. I think that's why we need to keep our vigilance up as well. We're putting together a little mailer of our own. It's not as slick, as fancy as this, because we can't afford that. But we will try to get the word out to people that weren't able to come today or not aware of what we're trying to do. So we're doing the best we can to reach the biggest number of people. So thank you for your question.
Can anybody, can you hear from us? Just so I'd like to tell you that the one thing we're trying to do in the last few weeks of this is we want to do a mass canvassing. All right, and we're going to need a lot of volunteers to help out.
I'm looking for work.
Email
You
list.
should do it.
I'm going to send out an email to everybody and ask them if they can come and participate in this.
Lloyd, so
We're
you
trying
should
to
do it
next
too.
weekend.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a job.
Yes, I have a question. We obviously have concerns about the congestion in the downtown city streets. But I'm very concerned that if we build these transit villages in the downtown area, we're going to have extreme problems getting off the I-10 eastbound at Orange Street. Because we have the 210 coming in from the north, coming in there. And you can imagine, and I wanted to ask you, if you believe that we will have backup of traffic on that Orange Street off-ramp all the way onto the 210, so that the log jams both the 210 and the 10 at that intersection.
Am I allowed to make a comment or just ask a question?
Well, can you answer that? I'm just trying to address this question, and I'm going to send it to Tom and probably to Bill.
Okay, hang on.
You already have that. It's already started. 5 o'clock, any day, any weekday. Okay, go from the 210. If you're on the 210, you're going to get off at Eureka. You better be in the right-hand lane the whole way. Squeeze your way along there, and hope that eventually the light at Eureka turns green, so you can move forward another 400 feet and then wait for another red light.
Am I allowed to make a quick comment?
Okay. Bill, did you have anything to add to that?
I'd like to point out that the traffic congestion, that's only a short-term problem. Mayor Paul Foster has said that his goal is to completely eliminate traffic by 2035 and have everyone be on foot, on bicycle, or on the bus. Secondly, what exactly is Senate Bill 50 and Senate Bill 330?
Okay, first of all, I never heard that, what you said about Mayor Foster, but it's pretty amazing.
I try to go to city council meetings at least twice a month.
Okay. As far as Senate Bill 330 and Senate Bill 50, these are part of a massive number of housing bills that were brought up in 2019 in response to the housing crisis
Okay.
that we have that Mayor Cunningham spoke about. And I would like to ask him maybe to talk a little bit about both of those. But as far as Senate Bill 50 goes, it has been defeated 3 times in a row. Now, if it were baseball, they'd be out. So, but they're not. They're sort of zombie politicians, and they're going to come back. But we don't know when that will be. And
You got to
we don't
move
know
back
what-
and give somebody else the
what
opportunity
shape
to ask
it will
questions,
have.
Josh.
Because it's been defeated 3 times, it will need major work to get any new converts to it. So I don't expect that to happen too soon. That was requiring, Senate Bill 50 would require a lot of this type of development that Measure G is permitting or allowing or demanding. So I think it's a message, if we say no, it's a message to the city council and additionally to the state that, you know what, the people of California and especially the people of Redlands do not want this kind of stuff. And we are sovereign here. I'm going to ask Mayor Cunningham if he wants to say a few words.
Okay. No more questions, Josh. They got a line.
Okay, can we go?
Senate Bill 330, I will say just a brief little bit. I'm not real up on it, except it has already passed, so the things are going to happen. But it's a lot of the requirements are more specifically aimed at larger cities, so-called affected cities, which Redlands is not one of those. So without being too vague on
Tell her
this,
about that when we're
I can
done.
only say that I think that some of it will not apply to us.
Really a reverse psychology scheme.
And I'm sorry that I can't give you a better answer. I would love to hear someone else come up with a little more information.
I might add this, that politicians, the people that we've elected to represent us in Sacramento, are under essentially the same pressure as our local city council politicians. The developers are telling us, we can't build the things we want to build, you're demanding more housing, but those stodgy old people in the cities with their old-fashioned regulations are standing in the way. You need to impose upon them a change that forces them to allow us to build the apartment buildings that you think you need. So there's a bit of a ruse there, and that's how I interpret it. The 2 bills that you alluded to essentially attempt to nullify some of the restrictions that we talked about earlier. And that's why those bills came before the legislature in Sacramento, is, I believe, pressure from developers.
You have a question?
Yeah. My comment is about the train system that's coming to Redlands. Now, everybody's already aware that trains make a lot of noise, although I was surprised, somebody, I think you, said that the train would only run like twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. And I was just going to say why the city council is trying to push this train system if the train is only going to run twice a day. There's really no point to it.
Okay, I'm sorry that I was not clear on that. When I said there will be one running in the morning, one in the evening, I'm referring to the large Metrolink train.
Oh.
That one is quite a heavy train and is quite noisy. So that's geared for commuters, the morning rush and then the afternoon return home. For the rest of the day, there will be 18 trips.
Okay.
So out here and back, that is 2 times 18, I guess, as far as thinking about sitting at a crossing. So there are 18 of this other train, which is called the Arrow, and one of the things that our mayor is very proud of is that we will be the first in the nation to have this type of train, some sort of hydrogen-powered train, and it is going to be quiet, that train. But I've been on the Metrolink and I've been, standing by a station, so that we'll get that. And in fact, the lady that was here from the Transportation Authority, who's been shepherding this train project for many years, she mentioned that the Aero train, even though it's a quiet train, they will have a testing period once it starts running of I believe it was 6 months, in which they will be blasting horns. So we have that to look forward to.
And let's not forget the crossing signals.
Yes, there will also be crossing signals making.
We have another question.
It's not a question, of course, it's a comment. First of all, thank you all for those of you that have done this, because it was I want to make two comments. First of all, when you read the attorney's independent analysis, I think that should be justification for recalling everybody on the city council that supported this, because that is, you can't read that analysis and think, how could anybody that was looking out for the good of the country or the good of the city even approve this? The second thing I want to say, though, is here's an advertisement. My name's Vicki Hargrave, and I work at Century 21. But that's not why I'm saying this. The Board of Realtors in Redlands has already endorsed Measure G, which I was totally upset about when I was trying to find out that they had what position they had taken. And I think they voted on that after Paul Foster came and talked to the Board of Realtors, and then they voted and endorsed it. What I find interesting is, because I've been asking, is yesterday afternoon, I got a letter or a phone call from somebody at the board office saying, I just want you to know that Tony Momberger is coming to the meeting on Tuesday to talk to the Board of Realtors again about Measure G. And I think that might be happening because people like this group have been successful in raising the awareness of what is going to happen if this passes. So I have hopes for the Board of Realtors, but it also reminded me that probably a lot of our social or clubs that we have, the Rotary, Lions, all of those groups have probably all had people from the city come and tell those members why this is such a good idea. So my challenge to all of you is take that green, yellow flyer with you to any group that you belong to. It's important to talk to people individually, but don't let your voice be silenced if you belong to an organization that, whether or not they have heard from G, but I think that probably most of them have. Don't be afraid to go, and in the last 2 weeks that we have, talk about everything that you've learned here. And let's give it one big push. But thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you, Vicki. Thank you, everyone. I would just like to say, I would be happy to speak to any group that you can get me into at this point. So that's just out there. And if you have some ideas, come and talk to me. It's going to be any group you have, or even your own group at your home. So we'll go ahead with some more questions.
First of all, I don't wish to be videotaped. Second of all, I don't mean to offend anyone, but the median age in this city is 35. That's millennials. They think that we are a bunch of, anyway.
We know.
Yeah.
We know.
By the time we've canvassed, they've reached 4 to 5 times those people by social media. They're doing it right now. So I wouldn't say just go out and canvass to cover area, but be smart about it. For example, Lowe's, all the box stores, those are people who are generally renters or are barely holding on, that will be gentrified if this thing passes. Going to their break rooms and putting signs in their bathrooms, putting them on their cars, is a good central way to reach people in a short amount of time. And they're not, I'm doing that, and I'm finding they're not really that savvy about the issue. And so they're gonna trust someone that lives here. I met someone that lives down the street from me on Cypress in an apartment, and she had no idea. And so when you're speaking to these people and you're trying to talk to them about the part of the measure that will affect them. For example, there's a high chance they will be displaced. I wrote some of these articles on Nextdoor app if you want to use any of that information. You know, to be able to speak to people directly about what will affect them is the best way to canvass, and to do it in both. Also, the train, the smaller train, the hydrogen train, won't be blowing a horn, and it will be 24 trains a day every 30 minutes. Downtown, the downtown area is going to have one-way change to two ways, so that traffic from Redlands downtown will also be flowing onto Orange, right in front of the mall. SB 330, just one more thing.
One more thing.
SB 330 works within the current zoning laws. If something is housing, it will not get changed. It's not at all related to Measure G. They are using this argument to try to stronghold our age group and make us afraid. It has nothing to do with it. A Senate bill or Assembly Bill 68 is to streamline permitting so that they can build granny flats. So if there's a developer area that can be for housing, they can put low to moderate housing on that flat. So it has nothing to do. Don't let them tell you that. They're using a lot of scare tactics. My guess is they want to avoid the state telling them that they need to put affordable housing and low-income housing downtown. That's the push I believe we're dealing with here. Because they said on social media that affordable housing does not pencil out. So they're not interested at all in affordable housing. They said the housing downtown will be upscale. Scott Welsh, I don't know if you're here, but he said this, it's on social media. They'll be upscale, expensive for good families. So their opinion of what belongs down there is some ideal that isn't going to happen unless there's someone down there that's going to beat them into submission. Also, Uber has 24 services that the rail is competing with. 24 services. If you have anxiety, they'll bring you a kitten for 30 minutes to ease your anxiety.
Okay, I appreciate your comments very much. And the point that she made about your phone and social media, I completely concur with. Do as much as you can. You know, talk to people. Write something.
On the subject of social media, we also have a Facebook page, Save Redlands, Vote No on Measure G. Save Redlands, Vote No on Measure G, and you will find materials there ready for sharing to your own pages and your own friends.
Yes, and I'll probably put some things on the website as well. So that's great, and I want us to keep going. If you need to leave, don't feel like you can't. We're not keeping you prisoner here. Let me let Andy make a comment first.
Just wanted to say a couple quick things about the railroad. I'm actually a railroad fan. I've actually taken training as a railroad engineer, and there's some misconception or misinformation out there. The idea is that the train we're supposed to get will have a full-size Metrolink train in the morning with a diesel locomotive and another one in the evening, as Lane alluded to, that will go all the way from Redlands to downtown Los Angeles. You won't have to change trains anymore. In between will be something called the diesel multiple unit, which is a sort of a mini train that has the engine in the middle of the passenger cars. And to make ridership work, frequency of service is important. So what we've been told is a number somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 trains per day of the smaller ones in order to have that frequency of service every half hour. That's the goal. We haven't seen a firm schedule. That's going to evolve as the train gets here. but that's the volume of railroad traffic that potentially will come. Now, there's a mention of train horns. The Federal Railroad Administration requires the engineer to sound the horn approaching a grade crossing. That's where a street crosses the tracks. Two longs, a short, and a long. That's mandatory. Unless the grade crossing has been reconfigured to what's called quiet crossing. That means you have crossing guards on both sides, in both directions. Essentially, it's a barricade where nobody can try to go around the end of it. If you have that, then you don't have to sound the horn. And the city has told us that we'll have quiet crossings in the center of town. How that actually will play out, or if it'll play out, I can't tell you, but that's a clarification on when and where and how the train horn might be sounded. But even without the horn, you're going to hear the train, you'll hear the engine, you'll hear the rail cars rolling down the tracks, you feel the vibration if you're in one of those apartments that are very close to the tracks. So it's not only the horn, it's not just the diesel engine in the morning, it's the train that's going to make those crossing guards come down as it goes through. The traffic is going to back up, and 30 minutes later, another train is going to come through, and it'll back up, and that's what we're going to do. So enough said about trains.
I have a question about the small train. What's the range of that?
The small train is designed to run only from Redlands to San Bernardino. And so that's about 9 miles. And they alluded to a hydrogen-powered train. That's a prototype that hasn't even been built, and whether it'll work and where we'll get the hydrogen is so far out in the future that it shouldn't even be in the discussion. The engine in the current trains that they're purchasing now is a diesel engine running a generator in the center of the train.
And that's pollution, right?
Josh.
I'm sorry?
That's pollution, right?
Well, up to some degree. I mean, they say that the new diesel engines are cleaner than the old ones, and that's probably true, but it's still a diesel engine.
Okay, we have another question up here.
These are questions, no comments. Number one, 3 questions. Number 1, Bill Cunningham and Andy Holder. Does speaking at the public comments at City Council on Tuesday, 6 p.m. make a difference? The 3-minute public comments. That's the first question. Does that help? Number 2, the issue of disability. What about those of us who have difficulty in ambulating or have lung problems? Is that being mitigated with regard to walkable villages, etc.? Okay, number 2. Number 3, is there sound when there's trains over there? We have to stop, and does all cars make sound? Thank you. Those are the 3 questions.
Well, as far as walkability and making it accessible to people that are somewhat impaired, the idea of walkability as it's sold now sounds to me like it's aimed at people that are kind of in great physical shape.
Discrimination.
And young and mobile, and they can ride their bicycle all day in July when it's 105 degrees outside. The rest of us, it isn't quite that walkable. That's my opinion.
Excellent question.